Well, I want to touch back on Casey. You mentioned the PAVE report, and I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about how racial bias continues to be a real polarizing topic in both residential and commercial real estate appraisal industry. And what's your take on this important issue, and what inroads are being made across the profession to combat this issue?
Rodman and Johnny, why don't you take the first bite at that, because you've been really deep in the weeds on that.
Yeah. Johnny, go ahead. I've got some stuff that I can talk about, but I'd love to yield the floor to you.
Sure. I mean, so it's definitely affecting the profession as we see. I think the key here is to education. So one of the things that myself and a lot of the other organizations have done is come together for the profession to educate the profession on what's happening in terms of bias and so forth. Right at the beginning of the pandemic and why these stories were coming out, we did actually a really good webinar. And when I say organization, it was ASA, AI, MBREA, farm managers, IAAO, and NSREA. So we all came together and said, hey, we got to do better for this profession, and let's educate the profession. And what we talked about, or what the topics that we covered in this webinar, was unconscious bias. As someone said, there's bad apples in every profession. And so we didn't necessarily want to grab these bad apples and say, hey, you're messing up. What we ended up doing is taking a step back and say, okay, let's look at this in its entirety and see what could be the issues here. And all of us, and I'm talking all of us, have some type of bias. And we have unconscious bias that we don't realize that we have. And so we took that approach, and we're continuing to take that approach, is education. Let's educate our profession on what unconscious bias is, what you're bringing to the table. And once you are aware of that unconscious bias, you can make a change. You could do different, you can change the way that you look at things because you're recognizing that unconscious bias. So that's one of the things that we take it on and we're continuing to do is from an education standpoint. The other things that we're doing is, we seen the pay report, all of us have looked at it. There are some things that we don't necessarily agree with, but there are some things that we do agree with. And those things that we do agree with, we're trying to work together with the foundation. Perea is an example of trying to change the obstacles that we have in place right now for entry into this profession. As Casey said, and a lot of our members are saying the same thing. They came in this industry because their mother, their father, and so forth were the ones that brought them in. Well, we need to figure out how we can also entice those that are not necessarily in that, have that opportunity of family members saying, hey, you should come into this industry. And I think a program like Perea is going to allow us to do that because it takes away some of those obstacles that we have in place. So that's another thing that we're working towards to help with this issues that we're seeing on the bias standpoint, where we're trying to diversify the profession to bring other individuals in that are not what we see today. So those are kind of the two big points I think we're seeing and what we're trying to do as a profession when it comes down to bias.
Well, and I think some of those things that we're doing, like I said, I feel they're working. I feel like we're doing the work, and I feel like we're really moving the ball forward on those. So I'm pretty happy on what we're doing right now to try to get that diversification, to try to get our appraiser population to look like the general population, right? And we just don't look like that right now. So I think we're doing really good work on that. I think one of the places that we're lacking is I don't feel like we've truly identified the big problem yet. I think we're still working toward that. I think that there's still a lot of work to be done. I mean, we're talking about years of systemic issues in neighborhoods that are still holding on. They still have a grip on what we're doing today. I think, until we really get our arms around what we can do to kind of change that, it's still kind of one of those things where, there's brilliant people working on this, by the way. I mean, the professors that are working on this, the people that are in there actually doing the work are brilliant people. But I don't really know that we've really got to the problem. And there's reasons for that. I mean, if you think about even a lot of these reports that you see on bias, like on the news, we don't see those appraisal reports. So, as an appraiser, I would have loved to have seen the two appraisal reports in question and go, well, which one is right and which one is wrong? Is this a true case of bias, or is this unfortunately just a really bad appraiser who didn't have the geographic competence to go and do work in that area. It's been really hard because we don't have the data to conclude as much as we'd like to conclude. So I think it makes it really hard for us in terms of figuring out what that solution is going to be when we're still looking really hard to make sure that we've got the problem identified. So I think it's an issue that we're still going to have to be studying, that we're going to be consistently working on, not just the next year, not the next 2 years, but we have to really make sure that we're doing deep dives, looking at all the data, make sure that we're trying to, again, be part of solutions. Because it's such a big topic and such a big issue. I will say it's probably one of the most difficult issues that I dealt with in my professional career, because I still, as much as I've gone through and like Johnny's done, I mean, I'm sure he has sat in room after room after room and had conversation after conversation after conversation. I feel like I've moved a little bit in my knowledge and getting closer to that solution. But I still feel like we've got just a lot of work that has to be done in that area yet. So, I am encouraged. I will tell you this: there have been incredible leaders who have popped up in that space. People that I might not have known that came in and that showed really good leadership. I put together a team to really study every one of those reports that were coming out to see. And I told them when I put together this team that it wasn't about saying what's wrong in a report, but really trying to look at the data and go, well, where could these people maybe use better data? The people who are doing the studies, where could they maybe have better data to move us closer to a solution? I wanted to make sure that we were always open-minded, but we had a tremendous leadership that stepped up, and we just concluded with some of our reports now. And I feel like we're closer to an answer or closer to identifying that problem, but I feel like we've got a long ways to go.
Right. And I want to add on before you say so, Casey. I also want to add on, and I said this publicly before. The appraisers if you were poker players, they got a bad set of cards. Think about it. I mean, the redlining and that sort of thing that happened years ago, and there was the act that changed that, but that set of cards didn't necessarily change for a lot of the other players that's in part of this poker table, because the lenders, they were still looking at this redlining and still using it and pushing our appraisers to do that. The realtors, that sort of thing. So I hate this. I mean, I feel sorry for our appraisers because they were just trying to do the job that was given to them with the cards that they had in their hands. And the other players weren't changing the landscape of that game. And so they unfortunately are the ones that's getting or put in the limelight of not doing the appropriate thing, but they got a bad set of cards. And so that's what we're trying to do, is change that table, change those cards to help them be the better player at the table moving forward.
We want real people, and you're right, it's a handful. I don't remember which you two gentlemen said that, but there are bad actors in every profession. I don't care who it is. And you can take the police for an example. You get a bad police person and then all the police get lumped in in the same bucket, and it's not fair. But unfortunately, that's just kind of how we act and react at times. But yeah, AVMs, if you start looking at the automated valuation models, and then they can start programming, if they can start programming what they want, they can start programming what they want to lend on too, and where they don't want to lend. And there's more scary things that could happen with AVMs than having a person go out and give an opinion of value.
You're right. Look at what insurance is. They've figured out how to go ahead and program your credit score in to affect your insurance rating. It's supposed to be an actuarial process on risk, not your credit. Anything can happen to somebody on credit, medical or, whatever. And so the insurance industry is a good bellwether to exactly what you're talking about, Rodman, in terms of, the programming bias. And guess what? Most of the people managing these areas, we have no coding experience. We don't have no idea how to dig that stuff out of coding. Lucas does, but I know I don't. And so, look at the regulatory environment. I compliment the Appraisal Institute, and I'm critical of them a lot, but they have stood up on these issues and any new data and said, one example is one too many. And
a lot of different bad actors and, people in the industry, but it sounds like there's a lot of different professional organizations and appraisers really trying to push the ball forward to really improve, what we have here.